Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Gift of Need podcast. I'm Jude Trang, author and observer of human need in society. This podcast explores the overlooked power of need and how it shapes behavior, relationships, and society. And it's born from the belief that our needs are not burdens, but gifts. And I'm very excited. My guest today is Gregory McNamee, a writer, journalist, editor, publisher, photographer, lecturer, traveler, and desert rat. He is the author or title page editor of 45 books and more than 10,000, yes, that's right, 10,000 periodical publications, including articles, essays, reviews, interviews, editorials, poems, and short stories. Gregory, I'm exhausted just saying that. Would you tell us a little about your teaching and advisory work and yourself in general?
Well, it just sounds like resume padding to me.
Yeah.
So, no. You live long enough and you stay active and things happen. You just begin to amass.
Well,
stuff.
for some people.
So, I have been worked in journalism and publishing and various other aspects of the printed word all my life, basically. I started off as a bookstore clerk and wound up working in publishing and, doing everything, working on a loading dock. I mean, everything you could do connected with books. And that's basically my story. And from that, of course, comes some teaching. I taught for many years, a class teaching economists how to write, budding economists at the business school here at the University of Arizona, which was pretty interesting. I did that for 14 years.
Whoa.
And, taught in Mexico, taught in Italy. I mean, I've just kind of, I've been fortunate in not having had to work under adult supervision for most of my life.
That's a great way to put it. Oh, boy. Well, we met each other years ago at our local coffee shop. Gregory was part of what is affectionately known as the Liars Club. Do you want to comment on that, or are you going to claim the fifth?
Oh, I think we told many a lie, and it was great fun. Just sort of meeting in the morning, drinking coffee instead of beer in the afternoon, and just telling each other stories.
Yeah.
And basically, that's all it was just storytelling.
Yeah.
And nobody ever said a story. As Ed Abbey, my old friend Ed Abbey, used to say, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So.
Well, I know John is still meeting with a group of those guys that are motorcycle riders.
Yes.
And they still meet every Saturday, come rain or shine, and they have breakfast and they continue telling stories or lies, whatever the case may be, and then they go on a motorcycle ride. So all sorts of characters, from somebody whom we kind of think might have been a spook at one time, but he won't ever say. A lot of geological mining engineers and all sorts of interesting people, entrepreneurs. So the Liars Club bred quite an interesting, eclectic group.
Yeah, it's wonderful when community begets community, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I was just we'll have a podcast coming up talking about third places and talking about how coffee shops are that. They definitely are a third place, your own little kind of community.
Absolutely so. And just on a side note, of course, those third places are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and fewer and fewer and fewer if you have no money. And it's all connected. If you have no money, you stand outside in the sun. There's no shade for you. There's no nothing. So those third places are privileged places.
Yeah, and which they're not supposed to be, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately...
That's a comment on our society, yes. Yeah. So, well... After our son died of a heroin overdose, my husband and I kept a journal for a year as a place to put our feelings and our thoughts. And when I was encouraged by a friend to turn the journal into a memoir, I contacted you to ask if you would help. And your enthusiasm for the project gave me the courage I needed to write Opiate Nation. It was really important in my life.
It's a very fine book, and I think a story that needed to be told. And it's said that everybody has a book in him or her. That's not at all true. and the good ones are few and far between, really, and the memorable ones and the necessary ones. I make a distinction between necessary books and just nice to have, and I thought yours was a necessary book. So,
thank you, Gregory. Well, today's topic is journalism in the context of human need. I don't think there can be any doubt that journalism fills needs for individuals and societies. Thinking back to antiquity, news was related, but at a snail's pace. Notice boards, word of mouth, official notices. The Roman Empire had couriers and an elaborate messenger system. The Middle Ages had troubadours, but news was of interest then as it is now. As a journalist and author, I think Gregory will give us some interesting insights. Let's start with a bit of your history. What first got you interested in journalism?
Well, I was just at the age in my high school years when Watergate was going on, and I grew up about 12 miles outside of Washington, D.C., and journalists emerged as heroes in that story, and it was of tremendous. But even before then, I'd always been a reader and a writer, even in kiddom, and I worked on my high school newspaper, and I interned for through my high school newspaper to I.F. Stone, the great journalist, Izzy Stone, who wrote for The Nation and had his own publication, I.F. Stone's Weekly. And I don't want to overblow my role in that because it was really just sort of sweeping the floor and putting things in file cabinets. So it wasn't all that. However, one of my high school classmates and paper mates, if that's not a bad word, won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago, and another one was a very distinguished reporter for the Washington Post, and so anyway, it was the right time to be a journalist and to want to be a journalist and to be welcomed as a journalist. Journalism was all around, and people were reading and paying attention, and real journalism was happening.
So from that high school job, then did you go into journalism for your college years, or was there kind of a specific career choice?
No, quite the opposite. In fact, and by that I mean when I went to school, I decided, now I want to say journalism has become professionalized in a way such that you go to journalism school. And that was, you could go to, there were a few journalism schools. A couple of my paper mates went to the University of Missouri, which was famous for its journalism school, and had distinguished careers. But at the same time, there was kind of if you talk to an old newspaper person, that person would say, no, you study a real subject. You study history, or you study economics, or you study something like that, and you learn how to write. And you learn how to write by being on the job. You don't learn how to write by sitting in a classroom. And so there was kind of a prejudice. I came out here, I studied anthropology and classical Greek.
Whoa.
And it wasn't until after I had gotten my master's degree in English and taught in Mexico, I came back up here and was sort of casting around thinking what I wanted to do for a job. And at that time, the predecessor of the Tucson Weekly, which was called the Tucson Weekly News, was interested in writers and writing, and I went and visited with the editor and walked away with a pack of assignments, and I wound up being the last editor of that publication before it went kaput, as so often happens. And from there, it's just I've worked in publishing, worked in journalism, all kinds, written for the Washington Post and the New York Times and all other kinds of things like that. So very much an accidental career, just like publishing generally has always been called an accidental career.
Interesting.
But an accident by choice, I suppose you might say. Who was it? Pascal said, chance favors the prepared mind. I was prepared to be lucky to walk into those kinds of jobs.
That is really true. That's a great statement. Pascal has had some incredible one-liners, hasn't he? Yeah. So tell us, what's the difference between a journalist and an investigative journalist?
Well,
or is there a difference, I guess, would be the question.
Well, I think yes. I mean, I would categorize myself, it sounds a little snooty, but it works in lots of different ways. I would categorize myself as a literary journalist, both because I write kind of long-form journalism that is sort of a literary genre, but also because much of my work concerns writers writing books and about literature. And so that would be where I would cast myself there. A journalist, let's just visit the etymology. Okay, journalism, giorno, right, is journalism from the day. So it's about the events of the day. Investigative journalism, you add that on, and you wind up with the Latin vestigium, which means a trace or track. Like, when we say we have vestigial, there's little traces of something left, right? So an investigative journalism follows a track to get a story. A journalist may just look at a press release and bang out, something. We hope that person is more capable than all that, but so often that is the case. So ideally, every journalist is prepared to be an investigative journalist, but the realities of the situation are that investigative journalism is, it comes fewer and fewer far between, only because journalism you can do very easily. You can sit on the corner and a story will come by.
Right.
And you can do journalism. Investigative journalism, you have to be on the case. You have to look and look and look. And I was thinking this morning of years and years ago, the Arizona Daily Star was really the first to break the idea that there was a connection between Iran-Contra. And it was through a team of investigative journalists that had been tracking CIA planes at the Pinal Air Park, cocaine shipments from Central America, and money being filtered all over the place. Now, there was a team of probably 15 journalists and support staff working on that story.
Wow.
Well, now, of course, with the realities of journalism today, we'd be lucky if we would field one reporter from the Star. Not to pick on the Star, it's endemic in newspapers, except for the big, well-funded ones like the New York Times. But that's just the way it is. Investigation doesn't happen very often.
Right.
One of the great recent investigative stories, of course, has been here in Tucson, has been that of Big Blue, or Deep Blue, I believe they're calling it, which is the data center proposed for the southeast side of town that's going to use a tremendous amount of water and electrical power, both of which are in short supply in
the desert.
Yeah, and in an overstressed power grid already. Well, it was an investigative journalist who turned up the story that the county had been disguising, because it signed an NDA, had been disguising the fact that it's Amazon.com that wants that big data center.
My gosh.
Right? So why the county would give in, except corporations rule the world now, of course, but why the county would surrender its authority to do that, I don't know. And that's not part of the story yet. But that investigative journalist will make that part of the story.
Right.
I've been talking and talking and talking, but I want to make one little connection with that. That particular story came to us courtesy of the Luminaria, right? A little local paper that's community funded. It's funded by donation. it didn't happen because of the Star.
Interesting.
And because they don't field journalists.
And what I'm hearing from you, Greg, is that the whole difference between journalism, which is watching for what's happening on the day, and which is apparent, and doing an investigation. I mean, you think about how that compares to like police investigations, or cold cases.
Yes,
it's very, very time consuming and human resource heavy. So that is the difference, and that's why there's less and less of it, especially as newspapers have less and less of a base for their income. Everything's digital, blah blah blah, right?
Well, we could go into another podcast all its own on the economics of that. But essentially, corporations own newspapers,
right,
and media generally speaking, and they use them as profit centers,
right.
So whenever a newspaper, let's say the Star, threatened to make a profit, the parent corporation would come in and pull that profit out instead of seeding it back into the paper and maybe using it to hire a couple more reporters. They're going to use it so that their executives can go and play golf. It's just one of those. It's just one of those realities of life these days. Your podcast is about need, and people need stories, one, and they need the truth, two.
That's it.
And they're not getting it with the current structure of corporate media. There are plenty of very, very good people who are working at places like the Star and even for the television stations here, but they are not particularly encouraged to go and find difficult truths. And when you likened the work of investigative reporting to investigation of crime, very, very similar to the extent that there's always going to be somebody that doesn't want you to find out about something.
Exactly.
And the perpetrator may have murdered somebody or may have poisoned the water table with industrial pollutants or something like that. But in any event, they don't want you to know about it.
Right.
And when they don't want you to know about it, somebody has to step up and find out and tell you about it.
Right. Recently I read the story and biography of Nellie Bly, who was considered the first investigative reporter journalist back in the 1880s. Fascinating. And this is the exact scenario we're talking about. She was just pressed Pulitzer's paper, which was The World, I believe, at that time, about this Blackwell's Island in the New York Harbor, the island where it was an insane asylum, and where there were women who were being put there because their husbands found it inconvenient. Somebody was found pregnant. They all had hysteria, right?
Yes.
So they would be committed. And so she went in, she feigned insanity and got committed by several doctors and went in. She was hoping to just be there a few days. It ended up being a total of 10 days. And her reporting, when her editor got her back out, opened up the whole thing about Blackwell's Island and eventually closed. But to show, and again, people in power did not want that story out. So I just found her story fascinating. And again, that I guess I would ask, what innate traits or abilities do you think are important for journalists in general? And we talked about truth. Journalists, like as a person, what kind of a person does this?
Well, I think you need to be born with a kind of an innate curiosity for why people do what they do and why things work the way that they do. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable in being curious because, again, as I say, people are going to not want to tell you things. One of the great saws in journalism is that journalism exists in order to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable.
I love that.
And it's very much true. Journalism, at its heart, is a defense of the common people for the common good. And this is why it's been called the Fourth Estate. It's part of the functioning of a healthy society. And of course, we, in so many ways, don't live in a healthy society by any stretch of the imagination, but journalism can help.
It can.
In that way. And the final, I think, probably personal quality, apart from curiosity and persistence, stick-to-itiveness, is skepticism. There's another old saw in journalism: if your mother says she loves you, get it from 2 independent sources. Right? So, yeah. Well, so all of those come to bear on the kind of approach that you take to storytelling. Mm-hmm. You're curious. You want to spin out a story about why something is the way it is. Somebody doesn't want you to tell that story. Somebody is going to throw smoke and dust and gorilla dust, as Ross Perot used to say, in your eyes and try to get you off the trail. And so you need to be skeptical. I practice, or try to practice, what I've called symmetrical skepticism, which is to don't trust anybody on any side of the story until you have confirmation that your mother loves you. Don't trust. Don't believe. We're all very, very quick to believe what we want to believe. We hear what we want to hear. And that's, of course, a challenge for journalism as well.
Well, and I think I've read that in previous centuries, because literacy rates were fairly low, the town criers were particularly important to get the news out, right? And it seems that accuracy would be a problem with that, since people take what they hear and pass it along with their imperfect memory and personal bias, like the game telephone. So how did that verbal news affect accuracy, and are there ways that people can be illiterate today regarding especially the news, getting news and passing it along, right? I mean, I have my own personal opinions, but I want your professional opinion, Gregory.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that.
Question,
yeah, there's a great deal to unpack. The first thing to say is, of course, in the time of town criers, there wasn't much news from outside. People may have lived in a village for all their lives and never seen the village next door, and never been curious about that village next door. For another thing, the town crier may have been saying what the king was allowing that town crier to say. Yeah. So I don't think that's the way that we really talk about news. The way that in, let's say, medieval times people spread news was you cut the head off of somebody and you sent it in a basket to the other king, right? Yeah. That was news.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes,
You're right. You're right.
So
let's talk about then. Aside from people, there being low literacy rates, even then, how can people be illiterate today? Even though they read,
Well, you can be illiterate by not reading. I know so many people who have been to school and who don't have a book in their homes, and who don't make a practice of one of the great predictors of literacy is growing up in a household where a parent reads to you, or some adult reads to you, reads you stories, and gets you interested in stories as a desideratum, as something that you want to have in your life. And that curiosity compels readers as much as it does writers, to seek out truth and this and that. We live in a time where of course, those kind of social aids to literacy are fewer and fewer. School is its own thing, but also when you and I were coming up, we had 3 television networks, right? And maybe we might have had in our hometowns 2 or 3 newspapers. So we had sources of information. But we were not overwhelmed and we weren't atomized. We can essentially today create our own media diets to listen to what we want to listen to in order to relieve our confirmation bias, right? I believe that so-and-so is an evil person. I will listen to such and read such and such in order to reinforce my belief that that person is evil. The person may very well be evil, but you need to get it from your mom, or
right.
You need to get it from the two independent sources who are backing up your mom,
right,
or proving your mom to be a liar, one or the other. So there are so many different ways to be illiterate that can be overcome, but they all require some work. Mm-hmm. And I give talks about this, about the work that needs to be done in order to get yourself a balanced, nutritious media diet.
Right.
That's not going to kill you with sugar, or it's not going to kill you with fat or salt.
Right. And that's the thing I think about broadcast news, the written news, with the internet and so many people getting their news from places like Facebook and X. How has that affected journalism? And what do you see as a problem, the problems then with truth and accuracy for those kind of things? I mean, you've just mentioned it. It's like, is it from two sources? Most of the people we know in America today get their source not from one or from two opposing sources. They hone in on all the ones that just reinforce their own views. Mm-hmm. And that's a very human tendency. I mean, we become our own echo chamber. But, how has this affected journalism? Just even the maybe even more than the internet. Maybe more even than the content in particular, but by the way that we get our news, that we get it in these little bits, and then we take off with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, psychologically, social media like X or Facebook behave in the same way, pathway to the brain that cocaine does. You get instant gratification. You put something up, and if you don't get, 10 likes or whatever within the space of a minute, then you feel crushed and you're alienated and ready to go and kill yourself. It's a very, it really is. It's a monkey with access to cocaine kind of.
It's the dopamine.
Kind of thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is, of course, not the way that life works generally, but certainly it's not the way that truth-telling works. And so we're used to a kind of an instant gratification cycle, and that has harmed journalism as much as anything else, is a kind of a loss of readers. I think, without meaning to sound too elitist, although I don't disavow that word, it's always been the case that there have been a relatively small segment of the population that has really been interested in anything beyond the immediate. And so reading and comprehension and intellectual pursuit has always been a kind of a minority pursuit. The difference is people didn't scream at you for following those pursuits half a century ago. They do now, right? You are suspect if you do that, if you want to push for what we understand to be the truth. So once again, that healthy media diet involves getting yourself away from things like Facebook and social media in general and spending a little more time. And it's possible. The New York Times has made a very great success out of its digital world. And it's been a rare case in journalism. But so I would say to everybody, regardless of your politics, regardless of anything, if you can afford a digital subscription, do it. Or go through, I believe the public library might have a subscription to the New York Times, and find it. And find other papers. Find your local newspapers like the Tucson Sentinel and Arizona Luminaria and the like, wherever you may live. Seek out the local papers and find out what's going on in your community.
Because we need that. And that's the whole point of the Gift of Need book, is that there are just basic needs that we have as humans. And I think we can tell from the interest that people have in social media. People do want to hear things, and do want to know what's happening. But then there is this attention span and this dopamine and other things that get in the way of actually getting what we need. It's kind of like, getting junk food instead of getting a good diet. It's very easy. And look at America. Look at what's happened to our bodies and our health from getting the quick fix food, the fat and the sugar.
Yeah, and our minds are full of junk too. And I'm sounding holier than thou on all that because I'm just as guilty as anybody else of posting puppy pictures and
well,
etc.
You're a man of many talents and writing genres. You've written some travel essays that are wonderful. I loved a haircut in Italy, I have to say, being an Italophile or whatever it's called. This quote by news anchor Tom Brokaw speaks and says this: "It's all storytelling, That's what journalism is all about." So would you tell us just a little bit before we close about some of your books?
Well, I hope that all of my books are a story in some kind of way. One of my books is called Tortillas, Tiswin, and T-Bones. It's a food history of the Southwest. It tells the story of why we eat what we eat and how it is that Southwestern food is different from, let's say, Canadian food or Italian food or right. Chinese food or what have you. One of my books is called Gila, The Life and Death of an American River, which the story is sort of buried right there in the subtitle, The Life and Death of an American River. It really is. Brokaw is absolutely right. It is all about story, and every story really begins, as Vladimir Nabokov, the great Russian writer, said, every story begins with once upon a time. And I always tell my writing students, no matter what you write, begin once upon a time, and then you can erase that.
Right.
Yeah. Once the story unfolds.
That's great. That's a great insight. Because that brings things to mind, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Well, we could go on. I can think we could do this for days, but it's time to bring this conversation to a close. Thank you, Gregory, for making the time to be with us today and to discuss how the needs we all have individually and collectively for this truthful, accurate journalism, how it can be filled by people gifted in this area.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Jude.
Oh, well, my pleasure. You can check out Gregory's books and interesting articles on his website, GregoryMcNamee.com, and that will be in the show notes so you know how to spell it. The great music you're hearing was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda at Kubanda Music. You can find him on any streaming service. Please consider subscribing to this free podcast and following it, and my free Substack newsletter. And leave a comment or review. I'd love to hear from you. Bye.